Welcome to Build Up, the European Commission's portal for energy efficiency and renewable energy in buildings. Directly stemming from the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, Build Up is the meeting place for everyone involved in making the European building and construction sector more energy efficient. Every month we focus on a topic that is key to making Europe's buildings as energy efficient as possible. Exploring that, you can find the latest content such as expert talks, webinars, case studies and more. From architects and engineers to academics and policy makers, we've got you covered. Build Up brings together thousands of registered members to reap the benefit of Europe's collective intelligence on all aspects of energy efficiency and renewable energy in buildings. The Build Up portal benefits from the expertise of our ambassadors. Drawn from industry and academia, the ambassadors bridge the gap between EU and national level and help shape our editorial content. Want to promote your work? Build Up disseminates your research, projects and events through a variety of channels. Become a member to exchange knowledge with your peers. You can disseminate tools and resources, share good practices, and consult open source publications. Join the discussion on social media and become part of the Build Up community, or subscribe to our newsletter to receive the latest news. However you participate, the Build Up portal is here to inspire, inform and connect. Build Up, the European portal for energy efficiency and renewable energy in buildings. Join the community for opportunities and updates.
Good morning and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Jordi Gonzalez and I'm a member of the Build Up editorial team. It is a pleasure for us at Build Up to host today's webinar and workshop event entitled the Stakeholder Webinar Series, Policy Shapers and Regulators. This is actually the second out of the 6 webinars that us at Build Up are co-organizing with CircularB. Today's event is split into 3 main parts in which policy shapers and regulators will shed light for you on policies, regulations, and initiatives introduced by the OECD, the European Union, and local authorities. But before we begin, we invite and encourage you, the audience, to send us your questions or comments on the speakers throughout the session. To do so, at the right bar you have the option questions or the option chat on the GoToWebinar tool. There you can send us your questions and we will have some time for the speakers to answer them. And also, we've launched a Build Up survey that we would like you to answer in the coming days, because we want to know your needs and expectations and if you're satisfied with the content that we at Build Up are providing you. So we would kindly ask you to submit your responses by May the 31st to ensure your voice is heard. In the coming minutes, I will share the link with you throughout the chat and you can answer these questions. So let's go to the agenda. And as I said, we have 3 panels today, each followed with a Q&A session. We will start with Jovana Pavlovic-Jukic, then we will go with Philip Mosley, and Tessa de Vries will be our 3rd and final speaker. And without further ado, I would like to welcome and give the floor to Jovana Pavlovic-Jukic, who will be our first speaker. Jovana, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jordi. Good morning to everybody. I hope you can see me and hear me well. I'm a team lead for Green Economy and Sustainability at the OECD Southeast Europe Division, and I will be sharing our insights from our work on supporting green and circular economy transition in the region of the Western Balkans. I'll be starting with some key insights of the recent project that aims at supporting this transition, and then zooming in on the construction sector and how to boost circularity in it based on the example of North Macedonia. So our Southeast Europe regional program has been present in the Western Balkans and has been supporting the policymakers of the Western Balkans for almost 25 years now in their reform process, in the design and implementation, as well as monitoring of the reforms and policy measures that are conducive to economic development, sustainable economic development, and competitiveness. We have done that through 2 flagship publications. These are recurring assessments, the Western Balkans Competitiveness Outlook and SME Policy Index for the Western Balkans and Turkey, that we issue every 3 or 4 years. The first one assesses and looks into structural reforms, and environmental policy is a very important feature of it. The fourth edition will be launching the next month on the 26th of June in Paris at the high-level conference. And the latest edition, the fourth one, will feature a regional profile on greening transition with dedicated recommendations on how to foster it across the region of the Western Balkans and for each of the economy in it in particular. The SME Policy Index, on the other hand, looks at the SME policy performance, and it's based on the EU Small Business Act for Europe, the SBA Act, with SME greening being an important aspect of it. So building on these two flagship publications, we identified the particular need to support the region in driving green and circular initiatives, and we launched a new project supporting green transition through circular economy roadmaps at the end of 2022 for the period of 4 years. As part of this project, we are supporting the governments of the Western Balkans in two ways: supporting the design of circular economy roadmaps for those economies that were in need of such a document, and support for implementation of the measures outlined in the roadmaps and similar documents that the countries may already have. In terms of the former support for design, we have supported Albania and North Macedonia, the only two economies still in need of such a document when we started our project. And we, together with the working group in these respective countries, developed circular economy roadmaps that we published a bit less than 2 months ago, based on the OECD methodology and in close collaboration with our colleagues from the Environment Directorate that already developed similar roadmaps for Slovak Republic, Czech Republic, and Hungary. When it comes to the support for implementation, as I said, this is more of a regional component. We are focusing on the entire Western Balkans, and we aim to foster the provision of expertise on circular economy, but also facilitate the regional knowledge exchange and the transfer of OECD and EU good practices and tools. If we look more closely in the support for design pillar, in each of the two economies, Albania and North Macedonia, we started with setting up the working groups, one in each, consisting of relevant government actors, but also non-government actors. We wanted to have everybody on board and consult them in each of the main phases of the development process. Parts of these working groups, actors that took part in these working groups were, as I said, government and non-government, and in the non-government and private sector, academia, civil society, and locally present international organizations that work in this domain. Then we developed diagnostics. We needed to understand and assess the circular economy state of play in these two economies by analyzing key economic features, environmental trends and developments. Here we focused on material trends, waste-related trends and emissions. And finally, we mapped existing policy and regulatory frameworks to see what is already there in terms of measures and initiatives, and where the roadmap can help basically bridge the gap if there is any. Then we proceeded with the prioritization exercise, using the OECD methodology that falls back on 4 criteria. Basically, we wanted to understand what are the areas that can be most conducive to circular economy transition of these two economies by looking at the economic importance, policy relevance, circularity potential, and decarbonization potential. And we proposed a longer list of priority areas, 10 to 12, out of which the working group then chose 3 to 5 priority areas that became part of the roadmaps. A very important feature of the roadmap is also a monitoring framework that we included, and it's based on a 2-tier structure. The first one with a set of headline indicators that monitor the economy-wide circular economy transition, and it's based on the EU Circular Economy Monitoring Framework. And then the second one, a set of indicators per priority area to monitor progress made on specific recommendations we provided. So in March, end of March 2024, we launched these 2 roadmaps. On the Albanian side, there were 3 selected priority areas: economic instruments to boost sustainable and more circular production and consumption, circular business models for SMEs, and plastics with a focus on marine litter. For each of these priority areas, we provided a set of policy recommendations. A total of 35 were outlined, and they are categorized into short, medium, and long-term measures, depending on the time horizon needed for their implementation. Short are up to 2 years, medium 2 to 8 years, and long-term ones that are more demanding with a horizon until 2040. On the North Macedonia side, we had 5 selected priority areas, the construction being one of these. In total, 41 policy recommendations across these 5 priority areas. On the support for implementation end, we're organizing regular peer learning events or regional policy dialogues on the topics that are pertinent to the entire region when it comes to circular economy. So we started last year with plastic pollution and how to combat it, the peer learning that was coupled with the study visit in Istanbul. And then this year, we organized 2 events on the margins and as part of the World Circular Economy Forum held last month in Brussels. The first one on industrial symbiosis and how we can drive and scale it up in the region of the Western Balkans. And the second one on the private sector as the lever of a circular economy transition. A very important feature of this part of the project is the platform that we created, a regional circular economy peer dialogue platform that is led by our team and is consisted of circular economy coordinators in each of the Western Balkan 6 economies and representatives from their circular economy working groups, but also OECD and EU member countries with an aim to exchange on how to design, implement, and monitor progress in circular economy transition efforts, but also promote OECD good standards and foster peer learning. And some of the participants of this platform played a key role in the development of these 2 roadmaps, such as Italy or Turkey, Hungary, that shared their lessons learned and insights from their development process of circular economy roadmaps and policy documents that were very valuable for Albania and North Macedonia. Let me now give you like an overview of some key recommendations when it comes to driving circular economy in the Western Balkans. But before that, just like in a nutshell, an overview of the key aspects of circular economy in the region. Waste generation has been increasing in the last 2 decades, driven by an increased industrialization, but also putting like a strain on resources already already strained resources and on ecosystems and economic growth. In terms of municipal and industrial waste management, it's still quite inadequate. The majority of the waste is dumped on landfills or even like illegally, and there is a minimal recycling rate of 6.4% as compared to 49% in the EU. On a positive note, circular economy is gaining momentum in the region and the policy documents are being developed. We also noticed that relevant legislative frameworks are also being revised. There are more ambitious targets set for waste management. Public procurement is becoming to play a more and more important role, and EPR schemes are planned or even like now already being introduced for certain categories of products. When it comes to businesses, there is still a lack of notion on circular economy and the potential it can have on their businesses. 42%, only 42% of business representatives in the region believe that the green transition can have a positive impact on their company, and only 20% believe that their business model actually allows for a shift towards circular model. There's a number of challenges that the business sector outlines when adopting or deciding to adopt circular economy practices. The main one being like the perceived additional costs if they choose to change their business model to make it more circular, but also insufficient funding and lack or unclear, inconsistent legal and regulatory framework to support this transition. As I said, promisingly, circular economy policy frameworks are emerging in the region, with Montenegro and Serbia being the most developed economies that have already developed strategies and policy documents based on the roadmaps that they created a couple of years ago. Bosnia and Herzegovina is the only economy that is still in the development process of such a document. And a majority of the region, when it comes to priority areas, focuses on construction, food, and agriculture. Based on our work, we concluded, how to drive the circular economy in the region. Our conclusion actually relates to the fact that a holistic and collaborative approach is key to supporting design and implementation of circular economy. The transition towards circularity is not an easy task and requires a broad societal consensus. And for this, you need to have all the relevant stakeholders on board. Once you kind of have them, you need to create some key prerequisites, or the rules of the game, as we like to call it, which is policy and regulatory frameworks, but also clear vision of where you want to arrive when it comes to circular economy transition. Of course, the necessary infrastructure, especially the waste one, is a key prerequisite for any transition. And we saw that, for instance, some of the countries such as Albania and North Macedonia that are now introducing EPR schemes cannot actually proceed with that because of the infrastructure that is missing, or like it has to go kind of like a faster. Then you need to raise awareness and build your knowledge and skills base. You need to have human capital to drive this transition. But even though with the rules of the game established and the human capital there, the businesses that are perceived as the key driver of the circular economy need to have targeted support. And this normally, like in terms of technical and financial assistance, and we normally advocate for using the existing programs that are quite numerous in the region to drive circular economy, to kind of channel it towards this direction. Finally, horizontally speaking, peer learning and collaboration is essential within like the country, at the country level, but also at the regional level, and more broadly, internationally speaking, with international partners, organizations, and different initiatives to leverage best practices and resources, such as from the OECD or EU peer countries. And now let me zoom in on the construction sector in North Macedonia and give you some key findings, recommendations that we provide in our roadmap in this area. We chose construction sector, actually, the working group and the government, for its high economic importance, high policy relevance, high circularity and decarbonization potential. The construction sector in North Macedonia accounts for 5.5% of GDP accounted for in 2022 and 5% of total employment, and it's closely linked to one of the most important industrial sectors in North Macedonia, which is metallurgy sector. In terms of policy relevance, the sector has been recognized as one of the key pillars of the newly adopted smart specialization strategy. Sustainable materials and smart buildings are basically in the focus, but also in the National Waste Prevention Plan and National Waste Management Plan. Government places also strong emphasis on modernizing and improving road infrastructure, but also continues to invest in buildings that prioritize energy efficiency and reduce material consumption. From the EU accession point of view, very important aspect, as you know, Macedonia is a candidate country. The sector is becoming more and more relevant as it must fulfill a number of obligations and targets. We also noticed when conducting our mapping that very little work in the sector when it comes to circular economy is done. So the roadmap could bridge this gap also and kind of create complementarities to the measures that are already there. When it comes to circularity potential, the sector obviously consumes a large quantity of primary materials and contributes significantly to waste, with construction demolition waste amounting to around 4% of waste generated in 2022. Although this data should be interpreted with caution because the majority of waste is mostly informally connected and illegally dumped, so we don't really have a clear picture on the data, and the data are based on estimations largely. Circular economy definitely offers many opportunities to curb the consumption of primary materials and this generated waste through increasing the use of secondary raw materials, recovery and recycling of construction demolition waste, and the production of sustainable construction materials. Applying circular economy measures and initiatives would also contribute to reducing GHG emissions. The sector plays an important role in this regard. Buildings, for instance, contribute to 3% of total country's GHG emissions, but together with manufacturing, the rate amounts to almost 12%. In our key recommendations advocate for a life cycle approach with a focus on design, production, reuse, and end-of-life stages. This is because the entire construction life cycle is actually from the extraction of materials to their waste management, creates significant environmental pressures that affect ecosystem health and also economic growth. We also aimed by our recommendations to create synergies and complementarity with measures that are already proposed in the aforementioned policy documents and kind of like foster the implementation or further implementation of all these policy measures. There are like 3 key areas that the roadmap focuses on. The first one are cross-cutting policies aimed at improving stakeholder engagement and collaboration, but also ensuring that funding is available for circular construction projects through different measures, such as the establishment of a working group for circular construction, then supporting the scaling up of innovation and ensuring funding for innovative circular construction and renovation projects. And finally, in the medium term, through the launch of circular construction and renovation pilots that can then basically test and apply the ground for scaling up of circular construction innovations in the country. Next group of recommendations focuses on, as we like to call it, like the reform of construction and demolition waste, or managing this waste in a more environmentally sound manner, including through using some information-driven processes, for example, systemic data collection, but also legal tools such as mandatory selective demolition or end-of-waste criteria. And finally, the third group of recommendations focuses on boosting the production and uptake of sustainable construction materials in construction renovation through leveraging tools such as green public procurement and introducing quality standards for secondary and recycled construction materials. For the latter, it is crucial to establish a system to assess the quality and safety of the recycled construction materials for their reuse for this to be successful. I'll stop here. Thank you very much for your attention. On this slide, you have links to our roadmaps, both for Albania and North Macedonia, and to like brochures with some key findings, like smaller documents or shorter documents that you can consult if of interest. I'll be happy to take questions if there's any, and thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Giovanna. We do have a question here that I would like you to answer. It says like this: what are the OECD's plans for the next period when it comes to fostering the circular economy in the Western Balkans?
Thank you very much, Jordi, for the question. Yes, definitely. As I said, the project lasts until 2026, and we envisage a round of support for implementation events or capacity building sessions. The first one that is coming this autumn will be focusing on circular bioeconomy. This is a topic that is very relevant for the region in terms of biomass, for instance, that is a very important material and waste category, but also from the point of view of agriculture that contributes to both GDP and employment. So we would like to shed light on how circularity can actually be introduced in this domain, and we'll be organizing it in Italy with the support of our partners from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Collaboration. As I said, the Competitiveness Outlook, our flagship publication, will be issued next month, and there will be a separate chapter on greening and circular economy. And based on these findings, we will also provide expertise, targeted expertise to the region in the coming months as per their needs and requests.
Great, excellent. Thank you very much, Giovanna. I know you have to attend another conference in a few minutes, so thank you very much for taking time and being with us and shedding light on the situation in your region. Thank you very much, Giovanna.
Goodbye.
I would like to bring up now Philip Mosley, team leader at the European Commission at DG Grow. Philip. Okay, hello, Philip. The floor is yours.
Hello, and thank you for inviting me to speak. Hello from Brussels. So I'm working at the construction unit in DG Grow, which is the Directorate General for the Internal Market and Industry. of the European Commission, and there the team is responsible for the competitiveness of the industry, so policies dealing with that, and its twin green and digital transitions. And indeed, the policy context we have in the European Union is a political imperative to move from a linear to a circular economy. And this is an area where there has been some European leadership with the Circular Economy Action Plan that was unveiled near the start of this Commission as part of the wider European Green Deal. And of course, now in the last couple of years, we have a changing geopolitical context since these original plans were adopted. We have, of course, the post-COVID recovery still ongoing. We have also the situation of war on our borders in Ukraine and the illegal Russian invasion. And this has been affecting construction and material availability and prices, and also the move to a circular economy as well. But nevertheless, the move to a circular economy is an important goal. Construction has very large environmental impacts. It's the single biggest source of waste in Europe. The Eurostat statistic is 37.5% of all waste in Europe comes from construction demolition. But it's not all bad news. There's a business opportunity to shift to a circular economy. There are new business models, new opportunities for businesses to take on. And when we talk about the industry at the EU level, we talk about the industry ecosystem. The industrial strategy defines 14 industry ecosystems in the EU, and construction is actually the second largest after retail. So you can see here the significant economic value of construction, the number of jobs there, 25 million jobs in the ecosystem, 5 million plus companies. The vast majority of those are SMEs and even micro enterprises. And because of that fragmentation of the ecosystem, construction does suffer from historically low levels of productivity and innovation uptake, as well as the environmental impact that I mentioned. So how do we deal with this in terms of policy? Well, the overarching policy document that we developed in the European Commission was the transition pathway. There's one of these for each of the industry ecosystems. The one for construction was published about a year ago, following a long 18-month process of co-creation with industry associations, with the member state governments, public authorities, other stakeholders, public consultation, and so on. And what this does is it's a comprehensive vision for the future of construction over the next few years. It's specifically its twin green and digital transitions, and also how we can ensure the resilience of the industry. And this document contains specific recommendations for action. So action at EU level, action at national level, and also action by industry. And what we're now doing in the light of the publication of this document is we're calling for its implementation through new commitments for action that align with the recommendations of the document. And so through this link, any of you out there, the industry or public authorities, or indeed other actors in construction who are capable of taking action, you can submit to us the details of what action you're taking or which action you're intending to take through that link, and we will highlight it and publish it on our website, and it will help us monitor and implement this transition. When we need to develop such a document, or indeed to have ongoing dialogue with the industry and with member states, the way we do this is through the high-level construction forum. This is a regular forum that we hold with events online on different themes, and also just a couple of weeks ago we had our annual plenary meeting here in Brussels at our building. And The forum has around 800 or more members across all of these groups that you can see there. And in the plenary meeting, we asked a simple question right at the beginning in a simple poll of all the hundreds of people taking part. What are the main challenges currently being faced by the EU construction ecosystem? And you can see there that the circular economy, decarbonisation, and the green transition figures quite prominently alongside other concerns like costs and skills shortages. So there are many challenges for construction, but the green transition is certainly one that's in the front of people's minds with good reason. Now, in terms of the legislation at EU level, there's a really new revision to this important regulation, the Construction Products Regulation. And this is the legislation that governs how construction products are placed on the market. So construction products meaning doors, windows, bricks, tiles, steel beams, anything that is installed permanently in the construction works, so in a building or a piece of infrastructure, is a construction product, and it's regulated under this. And the revision did two different things. First of all, to enhance the single market for construction products, and secondly, to ensure that environmental aspects are properly integrated. And so the idea is that we level the playing field for environmentally friendly construction products, and we enable designers and other industry actors to select construction products not only on the basis of price or basic aspects such as safety, but also in terms of environmental criteria. And so this will support the green transition. We also have some digital elements in there. There's a digital product passport that we're introducing, which I will explain in a second. And overall, this will support the move to a circular economy. It will support the competitiveness of the industry and these new business models and opportunities that I already mentioned. When we look at the timeline of the new provisions coming out of this regulation, so it's just been agreed, and the final text will soon be published in the official journal. What we have is a series of different elements that are going to be introduced over the coming years. And there I mentioned already the digital product passport. So that system is going to be established in the next couple of years. This will be a similar digital product passport to the one that's being introduced for all consumer products under a different regulation, the eco-design regulation. So your toaster, your washing machine, and so on will have a digital product passport, but also your construction products. And this will give digital information on the product's characteristics and its environmental information. And of the environmental information, one of the most important is the carbon footprint, and that is the GWP that you see on this timeline. That means global warming potential, which is effectively the carbon footprint of the product, the greenhouse gases emitted during its manufacture. And so there will be mandatory declaration of this carbon footprint, this global warming potential, for all products placed on the market. And then for other environmental indicators, such as acidification, eutrophication, and there's a list of them. These will come later, but it's important to stress that this also depends on the parallel process that's ongoing now to update all the standards, and the product standards are being updated one by one for all the product families. And as the new standards come into force, then these mandatory environmental indicator provisions will apply. And on these product standards, this comes under a piece of work called the CPR Acquis. And what this process is that the European Commission gives a mandate to CEN, which is the European Committee for Standardization, and the technical committees of CEN are the ones who draft the standards, so the EN standards, and these are harmonized standards. And under the Construction Products Regulation, these are actually mandatory standards. And so you can see that the work already started for some of these product categories. So the standards are being updated now for some of these concrete, steel and other products. And one by one, we will be going through this full list. So it's going to take a number of years to go through all of it. But the idea is that eventually we will have updated standards for all construction products, and then that will all work according to the new regulation. Now, apart from the regulation, another important piece of recent legislation at EU level is the taxonomy regulation. And this is a quite different piece of regulation aimed at finance, but it aims to direct investments towards sustainable investments, sustainable activities across the whole economy, including construction. So what the taxonomy is simply a classification system for economic activities, and we now have in place this classification of what is meant by sustainable for climate change, adaptation and mitigation, and also for the other 4 environmental criteria that you can see there: water, biodiversity, pollution and circular economy. And in particular for construction, the circular economy one is significant, as well as the climate ones. And there are new criteria there for defining what we mean by a green investment if an investment wants to be aligned with the circular economy. Apart from the legislation, we also in the Commission support various studies and other pieces of work. So one of the areas we're looking at is end of waste criteria. And end of waste criteria are the legal definition of when waste becomes a secondary material. And the legal basis for this is the Waste Framework Directive. So Article 6 of that directive is on end of waste, and it requires the European Commission to assess the need for EU-wide end of waste criteria. Now, these end of waste criteria sometimes exist at national level in some member states. So, for example, in some countries, aggregates have end of waste criteria. And at EU level, there are some end of waste criteria existing for scrap metal and for glass cullet, which is kind of crushed glass. So this study has been collecting background data to look at the potential for setting EU-wide criteria for other construction and demolition waste streams, so for the different types of construction demolition waste. We'll expect the study to publish quite soon now. It's coming to an end, and then we will take a decision on whether to go ahead and develop end-of-waste criteria. And then another piece of work that is expected to finish this year is an update of this guidance document, the Construction and Demolition Waste Management Protocol. This is a voluntary guidance document, but it's getting a little bit old. It's published in 2016, and also another guidance document on waste audits. There's a new document that's going to combine these two, and is going to be published later this year, quite soon now. The original protocol was translated into 15 languages, and we will aim to do the same for the new revised guidance document. And this will aim to reflect the recent changes in policy, so the Circular Economy Action Plan, the taxonomy that I mentioned, and the construction products regulation. So a lot has happened since 2016, of course, but also the technical and technological developments. And also this will support the industry to take action on waste management. That was my last slide. There's just a link there to our website where you can see some more detail on all of the things that I mentioned, and also our LinkedIn group where you can engage with us. Thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you very much. We do have time for a couple of questions, so I'll go right away. The first one says, how long will it take for the Commission to finish updating standards for the construction products?
Yes, so that process that I outlined there of updating the product standards, it is taking some years, and this is because it's highly technical work for the standardization committees. They are comprised of various highly competent technical people from industry, typically, and the Commission needs to give them a clear mandate, which is itself a detailed document, and then the SEN technical committees typically take a couple of years or maybe 3 years to develop the standard. So we're looking at around a decade, and we need to make sure that we keep up the momentum, because we're all keen to have these standards in place.
Okay. Let me remind you before reading the next question that you, the audience, have the option to send us questions via the question button. And this one member of the audience asked, are you planning to integrate circularity indicators such as reuse or recycle potential beside environmental ones on the digital passports?
Yes, well, that's an interesting question. Indeed, in the revised construction products regulation, there is provision there for reuse of products and for recycling. So what will happen is that the product standards, when they're updated, they will be, we expect there will be a version for a new product and also one for a reuse of an existing product. So that will be greatly facilitated by having a standard in place for the reused version. Also, the revision of the regulation empowers the Commission to introduce environmental requirements for construction products. So in certain cases, for certain products where it makes sense, we could, for example, introduce recycled content requirements. So this kind of things will be looked at in detail as we look at the standardization process as well.
Okay, I think we do have time for one more. We have here, how does the European Commission ensure coherence of European policy initiatives and national building codes?
Well, national building codes, indeed. I mean, building codes are a national competency. They're not an EU competency, so that we don't directly intervene in building codes. What the construction products regulation does is it regulates in a harmonized way across the whole single market, the placing of construction products on the market. And then how those are put together in the construction works, in a building or a piece of infrastructure, that is then regulated by the national building codes. So we, in order to ensure coherence, we regularly hold dialogue, of course, with the member states and with industry. As much dialogue as possible, really. That's why I was outlining at the beginning the high-level construction forum, but we also have more formal mechanisms for having dialogue with member states, with the ministries involved and so on. So this is an area of constant communication. And then across the Commission, of course, we have ways to ensure that we regularly interact with our correspondents across the different directorates general of the Commission.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Philip. Thank you for answering, and thank you for shedding us light and giving us the European Commission's point of view. Thank you for your time, Philip.
Thank you.
And now we'll bring the last speaker, Tessa de Vries, Strategic Advisor at London. Tessa, I don't know if you were there.
Yes, hello.
Hello, Tessa. Before you start, Tessa, I would like to remind the audience that we'll have a final Q&A with her at the end of her speech. So please feel free to ask any questions that you may have throughout the presentation. Tessa, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I'm here to share a little bit more about how we are approaching circular construction within London specifically. As was just said, I'm the strategic advisor for the built environment at London. And to kind of understand a bit more about how we're approaching circularity, I need to introduce sort of London and the role of the specific organization to you briefly. So London sits between the Mayor's office in London and the local authorities. And so it's a statutory body that was created to coordinate between the mayor and these various municipalities, really. We work with those public bodies, businesses, and citizens across a variety of different projects to inform, innovate, and amplify with the core goal of furthering circularity within the city. So we did not start as a circularity-focused organization. Started about 20 years ago, focusing on municipal waste, but obviously, as you all know, as thinking has evolved, we've moved away from the municipal waste focus into a circularity focus. The organization, we focus on 5 sector areas specifically. So that's food, fashion or textiles, specifically plastics, electricals, and of course the built environment, which I'll be speaking about today. And this has come up a few times, but obviously the impact of the construction sector is huge, and then specifically within the UK, it's 64% of our waste. But obviously within London, as within many, you know, of the main major cities, there's major pressures on housing and other construction related things. We know that we'll have an additional 2 million people here. So balancing how to reduce that waste with this ongoing pressure and need for construction. So one of the main things we do at ReLondon is support development and implementation of policy at the mayoral level and below. So to outline what that means, I'm going to introduce you a bit to the policy context in London. So it all stems from what's called the London Plan, which is the development plan for the whole city. It's set by the mayor, and it doesn't really have a set cycle. So sort of whenever the mayor feels that there's need for a new plan, that will happen. Our mayor got re-elected last week, and so the plans, the many-year plan for updating this kind of plan has kicked into gear now. And this London plan, which is at the mayoral level, sets the scene for those 33 sub-boroughs as to what they should be doing. And for a European audience, it's important to remember that those municipal sub-boroughs in London, again, 33 of them, typically each have a population of about 300,000 people. So that's a lot of, you know, small-sized cities all together. And those different municipalities create local plans that reflect what the strategy is in the London plan. Now, this is all relevant to the conversation today because the 2021 version of the London plan put heavy emphasis on circular economy. And the key policy that relates to that within construction is policy SI 7. So in terms of targets that this specific policy sets, it's not groundbreaking. The landfill diversion rate that it requires is pretty business as usual in London, so 95% recovery, so just landfill diversion. It doesn't have specific targets for reuse and recycling. But where it gets very interesting and quite innovative is that for schemes that are referable, which I'll define in just a minute, they need to submit what's called a circular economy statement. So a referable scheme is a scheme or a planning application that is so big, so 150 homes or more, over 30 meters tall, over 100 square meters of floor space, 100,000 square meters of floor space. So it's so large and strategic that it's not just that local municipality that can sign off on it, it's the mayor. And that's when all of these interesting requirements in terms of circularity kick into gear. So if it's referable, this new London plan required that a circular economy statement was made, and also encouraged at the local level for circular economy statements to be required. So we helped develop the policy for the circular economy statements, and that involved sort of additional guidance. And actually, if I go to the next one, right, so what these circular economy statements require is for each of these development schemes to really intentionally outline how they have considered circularity and also back that up with the data. So in the pre-application phase, they have to outline why they chose the approach that they did, why they didn't retain any of the building on site potentially, or why or how they are planning on retaining certain amounts of material. And again, that landfill diversion rate comes into play. They need to outline per building layer what circular economy principles they're planning on using. So if the inside is potentially modular or reusable, or I don't know, if they're going to refurbish the facade instead of getting a complete new one. And key, they also have to submit a pre-demolition audit, so information about all the materials that are coming out, and as well as a bill of materials, so a list of materials that are going into the building. And that all then gets signed off by the local authority and the mayor's office for these referable schemes. And these bill of materials, that then post-construction, they sort of have to audit that again and see how they compared with their suggestion. So this policy has been really key to changing the narrative within London. And what's also worth noting is within that London plan, the local authorities are encouraged to not just, sit back and have this only be for the large schemes, but also to incorporate what elements that they can from this scheme or from this regulation. So that brings me to the context of Re-London. So within Re-London, we support built environment activities within the city in these key ways. And the first one is that supporting the implementation of the London plan. So really monitoring and discussing with local authorities how that implementation of that circular economy statement work is going. We also run what's called a cross-authority collaboration group. So I host a meeting every month roughly with local authorities to share ideas and implementation and just really have like a helpful space to talk practical implementation. We also work with, Re-London broadly works with small businesses. So we also work with small businesses involved in the construction space. And then we have a number of special funded projects ranging from local authorities paying us for specific analysis and consulting to larger philanthropic funding or funded projects. But all of that work sort of centers around, within the built environment, centers on three key themes that we want to push forward with our local authorities. So in terms of practical action on the ground, this is what we think the main levers are, to get those, roadmaps and broad thinking into action. The first, as I mentioned, is the planning requirements as a legal mechanism. Within the UK, the national planning regulations actually lag significantly behind the innovation and vision of the city level. And this is the same across some other countries, but maybe not as much in some EU countries. The second lever is procurement, which I'll be sharing a project that we're currently working on a bit more in just a minute. But obviously local authorities, I think our estimate is that 14% of the construction sector in London is bolstered or funded by the local authorities. So there's significant purchasing power there. And there's a lot of good examples of EU cities leveraging that purchasing power to further circularity. And the third is infrastructure. So we have, it's both physical and digital infrastructure. We have a lot of digital networks coming up. And a lot of requests for space to facilitate material exchange. So these are the three key levers that we work on. So I'll touch on, I've already touched on the planning work stream, but I'll touch on procurement and infrastructure now. Actually, that's a lie. So for, these are two examples of where local plans have gone above and beyond the city plan. And they're quite inspiring examples if anyone wants to see how local plans can integrate this kind of circularity work. So the first thing that they do is they establish, well, they embed that circular economy statement that's sort of at the mayoral level for the big projects into their local plans for smaller projects. And instead of requiring it, they suggest it, for example. And these two are good examples because they have implemented, the one on the right is the City of Westminster, and they've implemented a very stringent retrofit first policy because they're such a historic center. Building projects have to basically share why they aren't retaining a building and have to assume that they will be retrofitting and retaining the existing structures first before they can move on further in the planning process. And the City of London, which is on the left, they obviously are also very, this is like really talking about the center of London, so very financially strong, very strong development interests, big companies, lots of money. They have to, they've developed a carbon auctioneering method within their local plan that sort of goes beyond the detail that the mayor requires, that people have to show why they chose the construction option that they did from a minimum of 5 options that they have to present at the planning stage. A third one that I didn't include is one of the local authorities who are experimenting with certain novel circularity metrics, which actually leads me on to our next point when it comes to procurement. One of our main projects that we're running this year is about setting targets and metrics. So as you may be aware, within the construction space, embodied carbon is often used as a proxy for circularity. So if you have less embodied carbon, there's a higher chance that your material was, reused, high level recycled from a bio-based source. But that's not necessarily a given, and often, you can reach embodied carbon targets pretty easily by doing pretty, things that aren't as helpful at just replacing the concrete, which is pretty standard and shouldn't really be seen as innovative at this point. So last year we ran a very big all-day workshop, that you can see a picture there, with the thesis of what would it mean to develop a simple singular circularity metric that we could include in planning and briefs for procurement and so forth. What you see on the left is sort of the equation that came out of this brainstorm. But this was a really interesting initial meeting that spurred a lot of people to sort of think creatively about what a circularity metric could mean for them. And off the back of this work, we have now received funding to do a piece of work on metrics and defining targets. So this is funded by the Ramble Foundation. We as London will coordinate the selection of a number of circularity specific metrics, test them both with the local authorities and with industry, and then basically decide, after they've been tested on real projects, which one feels like it's like the best or the most applicable for the situation. And then we'll seek to set a target for that as well. So I know there's a lot of metrics projects going on. This one's slightly different because it really is about that, not about accuracy or science, but really what is one easily communicable number that we can use to move the conversation more so than, measure exactly how much material has been reused or recycled. So that's an exciting piece of work that will feed into our sort of procurement work stream. It will be running until March of next year. And at that point, we will also have a public webinar. So if that's something that you're really keen on, let me know, and I can include you in any of that sort of communication once it goes public. Then lastly, I mentioned infrastructure being a major part of our work, or one of our work streams here. We don't have a funded project on this, but it is something that we continue to sort of navigate with the local authorities, with our local municipalities. I don't know how it is for other EU cities, but we currently have an absolute explosion of websites that facilitate the exchange of construction materials, and they are all sort of battling for market share, which is great. And we're really at the point where we are essentially supporting our local authorities to select which ones they want to use and to support these competitive entities working together, because obviously having little pockets of interesting data about your construction material flow is not as helpful as having one easy to follow stream of information about your material flows. So we're really looking to continue to coordinate these. They each have a different approach. I won't go into all of them now, but this is another major stream, I guess, trend and piece of work that we're seeing within the city. Then lastly, before I wrap up, I wanted to highlight, until the end of last year, we were coordinating the London arm of this project called Circuit, Circular Construction in Regenerative Cities. It ran across 4 cities, Copenhagen, Hamburg, Helsinki, and London. And I ran the last few years of the London arm of this project. There is a very chunky and helpful report at the link if you get the slides after, in case you're interested in anything circular economy, from roadmaps for all of those 4 cities to procurement requirements to, we created a reuse portal that aggregates all those portals and puts all that information in the same place. So a really good resource that I just wanted to make sure everyone had a chance to see. And also it's sort of the intellectual basis of a lot of the work that we're doing now and continue to do in London. So I think that is all from me. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Tessa. We do have time for a few questions, so I would like you to stay a little bit longer here with us. The first question says, how has the wider industry reacted to the circular economy statement requirements in policy?
Yeah, so I think in some places there's potentially reticence to put, more and more requirements on these planning applications, but in general, even having not what do they call it, like legally binding targets, the reports are mostly suggestions, like illustrate how you have done XYZ. They've done so much to move the conversation, and that means that in the next update of the plan in 2 years or so, we'll be able to set targets. So industry is in some cases, well, it's sort of striated, where like the top is very far beyond the policy, and we really need to help the lower end of industry move along. But just having these suggestions or a little bit of extra paperwork to illustrate why you made the decisions you did, even if you legally don't have to change anything, has already moved the industry so much. So the reaction has been positive, and I guess they really react to this, like knowing that in the future this will become a requirement.
Thanks. Another question that we just had in here, let me read it. Is there a standardized terminology for circular economy in the construction industry?
In general, well, standardized terminology, sure. There's some thought leaders like Arup and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. You should look at Arup and their Circular Buildings Toolkit. I think that's sort of considered best practice for what it means to apply circularity to a building. So, the classic hierarchy of first consider, do you need to build at all, and so forth. So that's like what we intellectually know is the right way to do it. However, there are some companies, right, because of potentially their, political or like their economic interests. I'm thinking like more like concrete sector, for example, that say, they put longevity at the top of that hierarchy. So that is part of the circularity solutions, but like what you prioritize is also kind of a question of like political interest and emphasis. For example, where the industry now, or like the leaders in the industry now in London, are very much moving away from recycling being considered anything circularity really, because it is basically downcycling in every case. So while like the definition is agreed upon, the interpretation thereof is very colored by people's, priorities. There is in the London plan, which I didn't share, like the mayor obviously has, this is what I think circularity in the built environment looks like. There's some really helpful flow charts that are really interesting for like, if you have a project, what decisions should you make? And that in that one, you can see what the, political priorities are in terms of what you apply for circularity. So I think academically, theoretically, definitions absolutely agreed. Interpretation and what you like market as circular, all over the place.
Yeah, and in line with this last question, which was from Ivana Kilsgaard, Jenny Marquez asks, what digital tools could you recommend to measure the circularity of a building?
Well, you can measure the circularity of a building without like any special tools, right? And it also depends on what you're measuring. I think the key learnings there are that a lot of that information as to like how much of the building is retained, how much just by mass of your materials are new versus reused or high level recycling or bio-based, that's information that you already have if you're making a building. So there's no special tool that you need for that. These tools that I highlighted are, well, and I should emphasize, there's also no like circularity metric that everyone agrees upon, which is like why we are working on a project to define that. But yeah, so I'd say all that information about reuse, recycling, and where the material is coming from, you should already have that if you're making a building, don't need a tool for that. The tools that I mentioned help with the exchange of materials. And in that case, I can only recommend the ones that are sort of like working in your area. There's a bunch of them, and the frustrating thing, I guess, about them currently competing within the London space is that the tool that works the best is the one that the most people use. It's not necessarily about what fun features do they have, but more if the most information about like what materials will be available soon and, you know, like the marketplace, where the marketplace is most active, that tool will survive. So every city has a bunch of different ones. So it really is up to a bit of looking into like which one is most active locally.
In relation to the first question that we had about the reaction of the industry, the following question says, what has been the biggest challenge progressing action with the local authorities?
I think different people would have different responses to that. And from my side, it's mostly that the individual people within the local authorities who check these, again, it's not all projects that have to do this complicated process, but it will be more and more. The people who check them signed up to be, you know, potentially planning officers who looked at energy efficiency statements 10 years ago. And since then, they've had to become experts on embodied carbon and circularity and biodiversity. So it's great that like their role is expanding in terms of the environmental considerations, but that's a lot of additional training and like deep understanding to put on some people. It's just like a really big skill gap and also just resource gap and just strictly time, even if people are very equipped to do the work. So I think that's the biggest gap. One of the local authorities that's very forward thinking in this area, Westminster, where I highlighted their new local plan, they have a project funded by Innovate UK to develop a digital tool, because currently a lot of this is still, you know, PDFs that people are reviewing manually, which takes a lot of time. They're developing a digital tool to essentially flag where numbers are out of range and just have a much smoother process so that someone isn't manually going through documents and reading and figuring out what's going on. But so it's a digital tool where everything's laid out a lot more easy and they can see, you know, this number seems too high or too low. You should ask questions about this and so forth. So I think by the end of the year as well, they should have that trialed tool up and running, and hopefully it'll alleviate some of that. But yeah, that's the biggest gap that I see, is just resources on the city side to properly audit all these policies.
We do have one last question, Tessa, here for you, which was about what you were saying about reusing materials. Isn't it difficult to recertify materials?
Yeah, this is one that I hear so often, and I think people hide behind it a lot of the time. And I just wanted to emphasize that a lot of the demolition contractors we speak to who recognize that this is a new industry and that if they do not move into the space, they will be left behind and they will lose market share. They say, yeah, it was difficult, but we figured it out. And once you figured it out, you know where to go, and it's not that difficult. So I just wanted to highlight, like, it is entirely possible. People do it. It's not, you know, the end all be all. Like, you won't get sued for using a reused steel beam. It's happening everywhere. So to really encourage everyone, if they hear that message, to push back and just know that it's not really an issue if they were trying at all. So yeah.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Tessa, for being a part of today's webinar. We're running out of time, so I want to thank you. I want to thank Philip, and I want to thank Giovanna, and also you, the audience, for attending today's webinar. We want to remind you that you'll be able to find today's recording on our portal and our YouTube channel in the coming days, along with the slides. And we want to announce that we have 4 more webinars in the pipeline for the coming month of June. So stay tuned, check our website, check our social media to see more updates on this. As I said, be sure to register on our portal to be able to share and disseminate your own content, and follow us on our social media, on our next platform, on LinkedIn for more updates. And finally, I wanted to remind you that we launched the Build Up survey. You have it right there in the QR code, so make sure you answer before May the 31st so we can hear your feedback and improve our content and what we are doing here in Build Up. So we wish you a very pleasant remaining of the week. Thank you very much, and goodbye.